So if you've been following along the last couple of weeks or months on my Instagram or even here, I've been working on a project called the Goddess Project, and it's about tracing the history of draped cloth basically from the beginning of time, and it's all going to culminate into a draped sewing pattern. So I've just decided it's going to be knit. I've done like 7 sewing patterns and they've all been for woven fabric, so this will be the first time it'll actually be for a stretchy kind of jersey fabric, which I'm really excited about. It's like kind of a whole new language for me. I think there's a lot of people who are comfortable with woven, and then like knit is just a different language to them. So I'm really excited to create something that doesn't require ironing, but is more comfortable on the body in the sense of it can kind of stretch and move with you. So I've been going through all my inspiration. I've created a mood board with all of my favorite images on it as inspiration for this design process that I'm working on right now. And it's going to be called the Esther. Now, that it's being called the Esther because my favorite painting at the NGV, the National Gallery of Victoria here in Melbourne, is of Queen Esther. And I'm going to be doing a whole kind of content series post on her and that painting and what that painting means. But just the drape and the fabric in it has always been something that's really drawn my eye. Now, draped cloth and goddess, ethereal, flowy garments have always been something that has drawn my eye and inspired me. So this whole project so far, despite it being a recent thing in the last couple of months, it has been something that has always really inspired me. And I've just found my visual diary from 16 years ago when I was actually studying fashion, and the mood board is almost identical for what I've created now. I think now it's a little bit more in-depth and maybe a bit more comprehensive in terms of not just going back to ancient Greece, but going back to Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley. But it is definitely just like a core pillar of my design aesthetic. So let me show you my visual diary from when I was 19 years old and studying fashion design. So this is the initial page. And these are some inspiration images from Alphonse Mucha that I used to really love and still do, from the Art Nouveau period. And then Magdalena Frikowiak, she was a massive model in like 2010s, like that kind of whole decade. And all of these kind of draped jersey dresses I was just obsessed with. And this was Alberta Ferretti, like just the most beautiful draping. She was another really famous model. I had some fabrics here that I loved. And then down here, Australian model Bambi, if you remember her. You can see here all these models and the draped jersey down here. Then you go to the next page, and this was my like kind of finalized design. I was actually looking at more kind of like silk crepes and stuff here, but yeah, really complex design. And these were some of my design options from back then. So as you can tell, I've always really loved draping. So from the combination of what I have in my mood board and what I have from just memory of kind of 16 years of loving and enjoying and being drawn to that kind of draped aesthetic, I am creating a sewing pattern that will be kind of like a knit jersey version of all of these inspirations. So I've started actually sketching up some ideas because I think it's really important to not lose that skill of physically drawing on paper as a designer. I think we can instantly just jump to digital illustration and have that ability to fall back on, just delete that line or whatever. But there's something about like the permanent nature of actually sketching a line and committing to it that helps you form your design decisions and make them permanent in one way. Yes, you can rub it out and you can start a new sketch, but it's committing to that decision, and then you can kind of follow that and you can see whether it feels right or not. And then that's kind of telling you something about the design that you're designing. So I find it's really important to physically sketch it out before moving into digital design. So I actually am collaborating with Fashionary on this video. Thank you to Fashionary. I am working with their Fashion Draw app, which I'll be using next, but they also have this little A4 fashion sketching book, which I found really handy for the analogue sketching part prior to going to digital. So in this book, at the start, you've kind of got some ideas for what different silhouettes are and garments and design details are before you start. But then after that, I don't know if you can see, it's kind of just got a really basic dotted outline of a croquis. And a croquis is just a fashion form that you can draw on top of. So that's where I started. The other really handy thing is they've got different edge finishing and stitches and darts, like pleats, tucks. It's really handy. Anyway, so I started kind of here with my draped designs. And here I was kind of tossing up between fully draping in a knit jersey fabric and potentially more of a woven fabric. And I love this, but I just don't think it's like, I want to really test myself and push myself this time. I've done 7 or so woven sewing patterns. So I have kind of covered that beginner kind of introductory base. And now I want to start moving into more experimental things that push me as a designer, but also as a sewist, someone who's actually wanting to try different techniques, use different machines, get a better understanding of what an overlocker can do or a serger, what my domestic sewing machine can do using a different needle, like a ballpoint needle for knit and jersey fabrics, and even potentially getting a cover stitch machine to find ways to finish jersey fabrics that make it look really professional. Because personally, I wear a lot more jersey in my wardrobe than I do woven. And despite having woven patterns, I don't iron as much because I've got, 2 little kids, very limited time. So I think actually a jersey sewing pattern, despite it being maybe a little bit more difficult in the making compared to a woven pattern, it has more accessibility as an everyday garment because you can kind of just chuck it on and it's going to fit you wherever you're at. It's not going to be crinkled depending on the fiber content, but it's not going to necessarily need so much ironing and upkeep. You can kind of just chuck it on and wear it as it is. So yeah, that's where I was at the beginning. And then I started moving into more kind of asymmetrical draping, skirt ideas, some other concepts here. And then I really loved this kind of asymmetrical cape, like half cape concept with the horizontal ruching, I guess, on the waist. So I kind of developed that a little bit further and went a bit more asymmetrical on the skirt. So now that I have some primary ideas physically sketched up in here, I think it's really important to physically sketch garments with a pencil. I think there's something about committing to making a mark. I know it sounds a bit kind of like silly, but there's something about committing to making a mark on a piece of paper that creates a kind of conversation in your mind between a concept of a design and the physicality of it, committing to that silhouette on a page that will tell you something about the viability of the design. So if you create that mark and you make that sketch, yes, you can rub it out, but it's going to be kind of annoying. You can't just delete it as you could maybe in a digital. So once you commit to making that silhouette, a conversation or a process happens in my brain personally that tells me, no, I don't really like that, I'm going to have to start a new sketch. Or it goes, yes, that feels right. And committing to making that permanent silhouette feels good and feels right, and I can develop on it further. So it's really important if you're a designer to ensure that you're making those decisions to make a physical imprint of the garment, because at the end of the day, if I'm going to be spending, the next 3 to 6 months on this pattern, it needs to go through those kind of tests in my brain to ensure that the silhouette, the design, the concept of the design is something I can really get behind. And so you need to kind of put it through some tests to see if it stands on its own, So anyway, that's something that I do. And if you're a designer, I really recommend, it doesn't matter whether you're good at sketching or not sketching. The point is repetition. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And the point of this specifically is making that physical mark so you can kind of test it out. So now that I've kind of got those concepts in this physical book, I'm going to be moving on to using the Fashionary Fashion Draw app, which is really handy for fashion design because you can bring colors in, you can bring prints in, you can do shadowing, you can kind of do so many adjustments that you don't necessarily have the time to do maybe in the sketching and getting the right textures and all that kind of stuff. So that's what's next on here. So thank you to Fashionary for sponsoring this video. There's also a discount code GODDESS10 if you want 10% off the app. So there's the Fashion Draw app and the Pattern Draw app, which is a textile design one, or any of like the books. So like one of these ones or any of their Fashionpedia, Stylepedia, Knitwear Manual. They're all fantastic resources if you're a designer and you want to know more about the process. So let's get designing.
So you can't necessarily see it here, but I've chosen just one of the documents that has a really basic female croquis on it. So I'm just drawing straight on top of those. So these were just the straight front on croquis, just to get a really, really basic understanding of what the shape looks like. But then when I went into the menu, I realized that there were all these other croquis that had front forms, back forms, and then so many different poses. And I thought, this is genius. I'm so used to just working with a plain front on form when actually you should be testing the design on all different poses, I guess, so you can get an understanding of what it's going to look like from all different angles. So I chose this kind of slightly side on piece with the arms kind of resting on the hips. And it was really helpful because it actually made me have to think a bit deeper about what the pattern and shape is going to look like and what it's going to look like when you kind of put your arm out, because it's got that cape kind of design. So it helped me actually figure out in my mind with the pattern making what that would be like. And this is what it looks like as a top as well, which I really, really love. Like I could easily wear this with a pair of pants or a pair of jeans. Like it's just so wearable. So when I started looking at the textures, you can actually fill in a bunch of fabric textures. So there's knit, rib, there's 2x2 rib, there's all sorts of ginghams and stripes. So this is just the actual texture or like the kind of woven print of the fabric. But you can also choose a color and like adjust the scale of the actual texture and change the direction. So I was just like, this is incredible. And then you can do it in whatever color you want. So I was like, this is amazing. So I chose just a basic jersey and had it in a particular angle and was really able to get an idea of what the texture of a jersey would look like in this particular design, which was great. So then I could change the direction again so it would be more vertical than a horizontal for the actual grain of the fabric. So I found that so handy, and you can just kind of block it out and fill it in. I kind of like eyedrop it from the actual palette, which was great. And then I was thinking, what would it look like with a pair of jeans? Because realistically, I'm going to be wearing this kind of top with just my basic jeans that I already own. So it actually had way more textures than I realized, but it also had a denim texture. And actually not just one denim texture, there was quite a few. There was like slub denim, wash denim, soft denim, raw denim. So I think I just chose the raw denim and just put it in a really kind of pale blue denim-y color. And you can already see that kind of twill weave that you get in denim. So I just blocked it out really quick and thought, great, that's great. It looks so good with some denim jeans. And then I started thinking, what would that look like with different colors? So I put some pink in the top, which is perfect because I'll probably definitely make it in a nice creamy pink as well. And then I thought, I actually have a pair of dark brown kind of denim-y twill pants. What would it look like in that color tone, not just denim jeans? So I adjusted the color, I put the texture in. So that's with just the texture in a white over the top of the denim texture. And then I thought, now what would it look like with a darker kind of chocolatey color in there, because I love brown and I love pink and green, and these are kind of like my three colors. So once you put it in, even though from there you can't really tell, but once you kind of adjust the threshold, which is like how much it actually the color takes up, you can kind of zoom in and see, yeah, just the really beautiful twill denim texture and then the jersey texture of the top. So it gives you so much of a more realistic understanding of how it's going to actually look on the body. So I did the I think it was a melange, like a kind of marl knit for the dress, and I absolutely loved it. Now I'm so happy with how these turned out, and honestly the variety of poses makes all the difference when you're sketching out these kinds of fashion designs. So highly recommend Fashion Draw. Now comes the hard part, the pattern making, the trialing, the sampling, and figuring out how it's actually going to look. Now if you want to try out any of these apps or any of the Fashionary products, just use the discount code GODDESS10 to get 10% off. And thank you again to Fashionary for sponsoring this video.